The world had never seen a sky like this. For days, the ominous black clouds swirled above every major city on Earth. No meteorological model could predict it. No natural disaster could explain it. But when the ships arrived, vast, obsidian behemoths that blocked out the sun entirely, the world's worst fears turned into cold, hard reality. The aliens had come. At first, humanity hoped for communication, for some kind of peaceful contact. However, their ship's intentions were clear when they began dropping automated drones, machines designed for total annihilation, on the surface. These drones, like dark, insectal creatures, moved with a terrifying purpose. Their weaponry was beyond anything humans had ever witnessed. Cities crumbled within hours, skyscrapers reduced to rubble, and civilians became nothing more than tragic shadows in the aftermath. The governments of the world scrambled to respond, but there was no unified command, no shared strength in these desperate times. Each country was too fractured, too concerned with its own survival, to coordinate an effective counterattack. The military, overwhelmed by the alien technology, struggled to hold back the invaders. For the first time in human history, Earth was united by fear, but the unity was fragile, as nations turned against each other in the chaos. And then came the message. A chilling voice echoed through the global network, broadcasted in every language, every frequency. The aliens, who seemed to have no physical form save for their machines, made their first declaration. They were the Xarii, conquerors from a far-off star system, and they would bring humanity to heel, either by annihilation or subjugation. "The Earth is ours," the voice boomed, reverberating through every screen, every loudspeaker. "Resist and you will die. Submit, and we shall allow you to live as slaves." The air felt thick with despair as millions of people watched in horror. Yet, in the deepest corners of humanity's heart, a spark of defiance ignited. Even in the darkest of moments, they refused to bow without a fight. At first, the resistance was small, sparse groups of civilians, soldiers, and scientists scattered across the world, trying to hold out against the alien onslaught. But there was one thing they all shared, one belief that propelled them forward: unity. As the weeks dragged on, scattered pockets of resistance began to form larger alliances, defying the belief that humanity was divided. A shared goal brought together nations that had long been at odds. Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia united in the face of extinction. The once proud political borders melted away as humanity's true strength came to the forefront. But there was something else at play. In the chaos of destruction, a new power emerged. A mysterious figure known only as Elias Verne, a former military strategist turned global consultant, began to unite the resistance forces through an unseen channel. Elias wasn't just giving orders. He was showing people how to think, how to strategize in ways that humanity had never dared before. At first, no one knew how Elias had made contact or how he had access to the alien encryption codes, but his plan to fight back was as ingenious as it was unthinkable. Instead of trying to defeat the Xarii by force, they would use the very thing the aliens could never understand: human unity. Elias explained that while the Xarii were technologically superior, their alien minds were incapable of comprehending the human will to cooperate, to fight for something greater than the individual. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or its science. It was in its people. In moments of profound adversity, humans had an uncanny ability to come together, to set aside differences, and become something far greater than the sum of their parts. "Use what they fear most," Elias said in his encrypted broadcast, his voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of raw intensity. "The power of unity will become your weapon. That is how we will defeat them." It seemed too simple. But as the resistance coordinated efforts, pulling in scientists, engineers, diplomats, and ordinary civilians from across the globe, something extraordinary began to unfold. For the first time since the invasion began, the Xarii encountered something they hadn't anticipated: a true coordinated force of humans, working together with a singular purpose. It wasn't just the military that had mobilized. Every factory was turned into a weapons forge, every scientist an engineer of war, every student and teacher a tactical mind. The resistance was growing stronger, smarter, and more cohesive with each passing day. Yet the Xarii were no fools. They knew something was changing, and they began to escalate their assault. Drones became more numerous, and they launched direct strikes on human strongholds, determined to break their newfound unity. But the more the aliens attacked, the more humans bonded together in their determination to survive. In the shadows, Elias smiled. His plan was working. For the first time in history, humanity had found its true strength. But now, the real battle was about to begin. The Xarii had underestimated the resilience of humanity. At first, the invasion had seemed like an unstoppable force, as if the very essence of Earth was being consumed by the blackened sky. But now, the tides were slowly turning. The resistance, once scattered and isolated, was becoming an organized, growing movement. Nations that had been on the brink of collapse were beginning to rise again, not out of fear, but out of defiance. They were united by something the Xarii had not counted on: hope. In the heart of what had once been the United States, now a rugged patchwork of alliances and desperate strongholds, a command center was forming. The resistance, led by Elias Verne, had set up their base beneath the ruins of New York City. It wasn't much, just a maze of tunnels and old subway stations, but it was safe. For now. Inside the dimly lit command room, soldiers and civilians alike crowded around a giant map of the earth, the lines between nations erased. In the center, Elias stood, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of screens, outlining the next phase of their plan. The Xarii's weakness lies in their overconfidence, Elias said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of a strategist who had thought 10 steps ahead. They believe we are nothing more than a scattered collection of weaklings, just one more planet to conquer. What they don't understand is that we are adaptable. We will evolve faster than they can anticipate. The room was filled with an energy that had once been absent. People who had once been isolated in their survival efforts now spoke as one. The war effort was no longer just about resisting the invaders. It was about reclaiming their world, about proving that humanity could not be broken. But the Xarii were not ignorant. They had watched the growing unity of the humans, their coordinated strikes on key targets, the rapid adaptation of human ingenuity to the alien threat. They had sent more advanced drones, more devastating weapons, but each time they underestimated the very thing that was turning the tide: the ability of human beings to come together as one. Elias knew that this unity was the key. The Xarii were formidable in their technology, but their hive-mind mentality was inflexible. They were unable to comprehend the human capacity to fight for something greater than themselves. This was what made humanity dangerous, this unshakable belief in solidarity, even in the face of overwhelming odds. In the cold underground base, a woman named Maya, a former scientist, had developed a weapon that she believed could shift the balance of power. It wasn't a traditional weapon, like the guns or tanks that the humans had been forced to rely on. No, it was something subtler. She had cracked the Xarii's encryption, decoding their language and communication networks. The weapon, she explained, was the ability to disrupt their hive mind. The Xarii operate as one, Maya said, her voice filled with excitement. Their ships, their drones, their strategies, they all rely on instantaneous communication within their network. If we can sever that connection, we can disorient them long enough to strike. Elias nodded thoughtfully. We need more than just a disruption. We need to cripple their ability to coordinate. If we can do that, they won't just lose their advantage, they'll lose their will to fight. But how do we strike at their core? Maya's eyes gleamed with determination. We've tracked the location of their central command ship. It's stationed just outside Earth's orbit, heavily protected. But if we can create a diversion on the ground, something that will pull their attention away, we might have a chance to launch an assault. The room fell silent as Elias pondered the plan. It was risky, but it was their best shot. We need more than just a diversion, Elias said finally. We need to make them believe that humanity is more than a threat. It's an unstoppable force. We need them to fear us in a way they never have before. And so the plan was set into motion. Across the globe, the resistance worked tirelessly to prepare. In Europe, a network of hackers and engineers began sending false data to the Xarii, making them believe that humanity had gained access to their command ship's internal systems. In Africa, resistance fighters used guerrilla tactics to strike at key communication hubs, creating confusion and chaos. In Asia, a massive underground strike force began assembling, preparing for the assault that would target the Xarii's most heavily defended stronghold. But even as the humans rallied together, the Xarii were not blind to their movements. They had begun to adapt as well. The Xarii's central command, once sure of its victory, had begun to doubt their strategy. Elias and Maya's disruption plan had made an impact, but the Xarii were not the type to back down easily. The aliens would retaliate, and when they did, it would be with everything they had. In the shadows, the Xarii leaders gathered, the cold, calculating minds of the invaders already devising a counterattack. Their drones had grown more lethal, their ships more sophisticated. The game had changed. The humans were no longer a minor inconvenience. The Xarii now saw them as a threat, and one they could no longer afford to ignore. The clock was ticking. Elias knew the stakes. If humanity's fragile unity could hold, if the plan succeeded, they might just have a fighting chance. But if they failed, it would all be over. In the silence of the command room, a single thought hung in the air, unspoken but understood by all. This was the moment that would decide the fate of Earth. The tension in the underground base was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity as the countdown to humanity's first large-scale offensive against the Xarii continued. The resistance forces had worked tirelessly for weeks, assembling resources, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the attack that would define their survival. They had a plan, but now everything depended on its execution. Elias Verne stood before a massive holographic display of Earth, his fingers lightly brushing against the projected map of their target, a Xarii command center in the Arctic Circle, where their central communication network was located. If they could cripple it, the Xarii would be thrown into disarray. But Elias knew this attack was just the first step. They had to show the Xarii that Earth would not go down without a fight, that they were far from the helpless, fractured species the aliens had assumed them to be. "Are all units ready?" Elias asked, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of urgency. "Almost," Maya replied, her eyes scanning a final report on the encrypted channel. "We got teams in position, and the hackers are ready to flood the Xarii communication systems with false signals. They won't know what hit them." Elias nodded, his gaze falling on the diverse array of resistance members gathered in the room. Soldiers from every corner of the world, engineers, scientists, former diplomats. Together, they formed something greater than the sum of their parts. The unity Elias had spoken of was no longer an idea. It was a living, breathing force. As the hour drew closer, the resistance forces mobilized. The first wave, consisting of specialized troops trained in guerrilla tactics, would infiltrate the Xarii's outer defenses. Their goal was to sabotage key power sources and create a diversion. Meanwhile, fighter pilots and tech specialists would execute a high-risk strike on the command center itself, using stolen alien tech to pierce through the Xarii's formidable shields. The second wave would carry out the final assault, launching a direct attack on the heart of the Xarii command structure. Outside, the world was holding its breath. The skies, still darkened by the alien ships that hovered ominously above, were momentarily quiet, as if the Earth itself had paused in anticipation. But the silence wouldn't last. In the frozen Arctic, where the Xarii had established a massive fortress, the first resistance unit had made contact. They moved quickly, expertly navigating the snow-covered landscape, blending into the terrain like shadows. These soldiers had once been ordinary people, ordinary citizens from across the globe, but now they were something more. Their unity, their purpose, made them lethal. A flash of light cut through the darkness. The Xarii drones, monitoring the region, had spotted them. "Move out now," barked Captain Irene Kalik, a former military strategist from Egypt, now one of the Resistance's most trusted leaders. "We'll hold them off as long as we can. The rest of you, get to the breach point and plant those charges." The first wave of the Xarii drones descended, their weapons crackling with energy. Captain Kalik's unit engaged them in a flurry of gunfire and explosions. The resistant soldiers, using alien tech they'd scavenged and modified, fought back with an unexpected ferocity. The drones, with their advanced armor and weaponry, had been designed to crush human resistance, but they hadn't accounted for one thing: adaptability. With every move, every strike, the humans seemed to learn faster than the Khazarii anticipated. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes, forcing the drones into situations they couldn't handle. As the last drone fell, Captain Kalik breathed a sigh of relief. "We've got them," she said into her comm device. "Move to the next phase." Meanwhile, the second wave was already in motion. Fighter jets, piloted by a mix of seasoned Air Force veterans and former civilian pilots, streaked across the sky, dodging alien drones and firing off precision-guided missiles at key Khazarii defense installations. Maya's team had done their job, flooding the alien communication systems with fake signals and false orders. The Khazarii were momentarily paralyzed, their systems faltering under the sudden onslaught. "We've got a window." Elias's voice crackled over the comms. "Strike now." The resistance forces, using the confusion to their advantage, surged forward, breaching the outer perimeter of the Khazarii fortress. Every step was a calculated risk. The Khazarii were no longer just invaders. They were an intelligent enemy that could learn and adapt. But the humans had a weapon the Khazarii could not understand: their sheer will to survive. The final push came quickly. The Khazarii retaliated with everything they had: drones, energy weapons, and ships raining down fire from the sky. But humanity's determination had already tipped the scales. The resistance forces fought tooth and nail, throwing everything they had into the battle. Every explosion, every shot fired, sent a message to the invaders: "You will not break us." Amidst the chaos, Elias and Maya, along with their small team, made their way to the heart of the command center. The walls were lined with alien tech, pulsating with energy. Elias's fingers moved quickly across the control panels, his mind focused. He had studied the alien systems for weeks, learning how to exploit their vulnerabilities. Now, as the countdown to the final assault began, he activated the virus Maya had designed to sever the Khazarii's hive-mind connection. A ripple of static passed through the air as the Khazarii systems began to glitch, their drones freezing mid-flight, their ships skidding off course. It was working, but just as victory seemed within reach, the ground trembled beneath them. The Khazarii had one last trick up their sleeve, a self-destruct mechanism embedded within their central command center. Elias's heart raced. If they didn't disable it within minutes, the entire northern hemisphere would be obliterated. "Elias," Maya shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to shut it down now." He moved faster than he ever had, his mind racing through the calculations. The Khazarii had been playing a game of brinkmanship, knowing that humanity would risk everything to stop them. But Elias had one final card to play. With a flick of his hand, he activated the shutdown sequence. The countdown stopped. The Khazarii command center, once a symbol of their dominance, went silent. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had won. The world held its breath. For a moment, it felt like time had frozen. The sky above, still darkened by the Khazarii warships, seemed to hang, suspended in space, waiting. The command center that had once been a symbol of alien supremacy had now fallen silent. The countdown that had threatened the destruction of the entire northern hemisphere had come to an abrupt halt. Inside the crumbling heart of the Khazarii fortress, Elias Verne and Maya stood side by side, staring at the flickering screens. The air hummed with a low pulse of energy, the steady rhythm of a system that had, until moments ago, been running on the will of an invincible force. Now it was disrupted. The hive-mind link that had unified the Khazarii fell into chaos, sending waves of disarray through their ranks. But this was just the beginning. "We've done it," Maya said, her voice shaky with the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "The Khazarii can't communicate with each other. They're blind and deaf." Elias's face was impassive as he stared at the monitors, his mind racing through the next steps. They had achieved a major victory, but he knew that the Khazarii would not simply accept defeat. They would retaliate with everything they had, and if they weren't careful, the resistance could still be wiped out. "We need to move fast," Elias replied. "This won't last long. Their reinforcements will be on the way." The sudden screech of alarms interrupted the tense silence. The Khazarii had just initiated their self-destruct sequence. A last-ditch effort to bring down everything with them. The base trembled underfoot, and the walls groaned as they began to buckle. "We don't have much time," Elias said urgently, turning to Maya. "Get the tech team to work on disabling the final trigger. I'll lead the extraction team." Maya didn't hesitate. On it. They had succeeded in disabling the Khazarii's command structure, but the real challenge now was escaping alive. The resistance forces were still fighting their way through the Khazarii's outer defenses, but as the self-destruct countdown began, the stakes had just been raised higher. Back on the surface, Captain Irene Kalik and her team had already begun their retreat. The first wave had completed their mission, but now they had to extract with the remaining resistance forces. The Khazarii, realizing that their command center was lost, began to regroup. Their retaliation was swift and brutal. "Fall back," Irene shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "We've got what we came for. Let's move before we get overwhelmed." She led her troops toward the rendezvous point, every step a race against time. Khazarii drones swarmed the area, their weapons unleashing fiery destruction. But the humans, using their guerrilla tactics and superior knowledge of the terrain, fought their way through the alien forces, using cover and strategy to outmaneuver their enemies. Despite the ferocity of the Khazarii counterattack, the resistance pushed forward with relentless determination. The unity that Elias had spoken of earlier was now their greatest asset. Soldiers, engineers, and civilians fought side by side, each one knowing that the battle was not just for survival. It was for the future of Earth. Back underground, in the heart of the Resistance's command center, Elias and his team made their way toward the extraction point. They were only minutes away from the Khazarii's central facility when the ground shook violently, throwing them off balance. "That was too close," Elias muttered as he steadied himself. "We need to get out now." The self-destruct mechanism had activated. If they didn't make it to the extraction point in time, the entire facility would be obliterated, taking their only chance at crippling the Khazarii's operations with it. But as they neared the exit, something unexpected happened. A voice came through Elias's comm channel. It was a message, encrypted and carefully disguised, but it was unmistakably human. "It's been a trap." Elias's heart skipped a beat. The message was short, but the implications were devastating. Someone in the Resistance had betrayed them. The Khazarii had anticipated this move. They had known the humans would target their command center, and they had set a trap for the extraction. The realization hit hard. Elias and his team were walking into an ambush. "Damn it," Elias whispered. He didn't have time to process the betrayal. He had to act. Prepare for contact. The team braced for impact as they burst into the final chamber of the Khazarii fortress, only to find themselves face-to-face with a platoon of Khazarii soldiers, their towering forms illuminated by the eerie glow of their technology. The humans fought with everything they had, their weapons blazing as they clashed with the Khazarii in a brutal firefight. Despite the odds, the Resistance fought like animals cornered in a cage, refusing to surrender. Elias's mind raced. He had to get the team out of there. But just as it seemed like they were about to be overwhelmed, a loud explosion rang through the air. The Khazarii soldiers faltered, their shields momentarily failing. And then the humans made their move. Captain Kalik's unit had arrived. The ground shook with the force of the explosion, and the Khazarii soldiers fell back in disarray. The resistance forces used the opening to push forward, cutting down the remaining Khazarii soldiers and securing the extraction point. As Elias and his team made their way to the waiting extraction ships, the facility around them began to collapse. The self-destruct sequence was in its final stages. The sky above seemed to crack with energy as the final blast went off, sending a shockwave across the landscape. The Khazarii's command center, the symbol of their dominance, was no more. The humans had done it. The tide had turned. But there was no time to celebrate. The Xarii were still out there, and they would be back. The fight was far from over. As Elias gazed out at the shattered remains of the Xarii base, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's unity was now their greatest weapon. And it was a weapon the Xarii could never defeat. The explosion that tore through the Xarii command center had left Earth reeling. The resistance had dealt a crippling blow to the invaders, but the cost was immense. It had taken everything they had to survive the assault, and now, as the remnants of their forces regrouped, it felt as though they had only scratched the surface of what was to come. The Resistance's victory, however, was not without consequence. The Xarii, who had once seemed unbeatable, were not ones to simply lie down. They had been hurt, and they were angry. And as Elias and his team knew all too well, an enraged enemy was often the most dangerous. The aftermath of the assault was a strange kind of silence, one filled with the hum of anxious anticipation. The skies had become eerily still, the darkened ships that once loomed overhead conspicuously absent. It was a fleeting calm before the storm. Inside the underground resistance command center, Elias stood in front of a massive war map, his fingers tracing the routes the Xarii ships had taken before their mysterious withdrawal. He frowned. The Xarii weren't retreating, they were regrouping. But where? We've knocked them back. But they're still out there, Elias said, his voice low and thoughtful. They've adapted too quickly for comfort. This isn't over. It's just begun. Maya, her face pale but determined, stepped beside him. We know they're capable of rapid adaptation, Elias. But if they were going to strike back, they would have already done it. They've retreated. Or they're planning something far worse, Elias interrupted. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. At that moment, the alert sounded, an incoming transmission, encrypted, coming from an unknown source. Elias's eyes locked onto the screen. It was an urgent message, not from Xarii, but from an unexpected ally. Elias, we need to talk. The voice was recognizable. Captain Irene Kalik. Her unit had been among the first to escape the Xarii's trap, but it had been clear from her tone that things were worse than they seemed. Elias activated the transmission, and the image of Kalik appeared on the screen, her expression grim. Behind her was a backdrop of a ravaged city, New York, once the heart of the resistance. We've encountered something disturbing, Irene began. The Xarii, they've activated something. It's not just their ships, they've mobilized something else, something we didn't even know existed. The unease in her voice was palpable. Elias's frown deepened. What do you mean, activated something else? He asked, sensing the magnitude of what was coming. They've set something in motion, Kalik replied, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. A secondary fleet. But this one isn't just for invasion. We've intercepted data that suggests they're preparing a weapon. A weapon designed to break humanity, not just by force, but by dismantling our very unity. Elias's pulse quickened. He knew the Xarii's greatest advantage was their technology. But to target humanity's unity, that was something far more insidious. They're not just attacking us, they're trying to make us turn on each other, Maya said, realization dawning in her eyes. If they can sow discord, if they can break down what we've built, they win, Elias finished. The weapon they've created isn't just for destruction. It's psychological. Kalik's voice was tense. We don't have a clear picture of it yet, but we found traces of the device's signal. We believe it's hidden somewhere in the remnants of their fleet. If we don't stop it, we could be facing something worse than annihilation. We could be facing the complete breakdown of everything we've fought for. Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. We'll need to move fast. Can you get a team together? I've already mobilized a squad, Kalik confirmed. We're ready to go. But we need you on the front lines. If we fail, Earth will descend into chaos. Elias hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded resolutely. All right, we're in this together. Let's make sure this ends before it can even begin. The next several hours passed in a blur of preparations. The underground resistance had been reinvigorated by the victory at the Xarii base, but the news of the new weapon struck like a thunderclap. There was no time for celebration, no time to mourn. The Resistance's leadership had to shift gears once again, planning a strike that could cripple the Xarii's last-ditch attempt to break humanity's will. The teams were ready. A mix of elite soldiers, engineers, and hackers had been assembled, all driven by the same goal: prevent the Xarii weapon from activating. Elias stood with Kalik as they surveyed the remnants of their makeshift fleet, crude, salvage ships powered by human ingenuity. In the weeks since the first wave of Xarii attacks, Earth's forces had made remarkable advancements. But now, as they prepared to confront the Xarii in their final bid to save the planet, the weight of the moment settled over Elias. He had always known the fight would come down to something more than just weapons or tactics. It would be about the heart of humanity, about whether or not they could hold onto the very thing that had made them dangerous to the Xarii in the first place: unity. And yet, he could feel the pressure of doubt creeping in. The Xarii's weapon wasn't just about killing. It was about breaking them apart, using humanity's own divisions against them. If they succeeded, it could spell the end of the Resistance's fragile coalition. "I've seen what the Xarii are capable of," Kalik said, her voice steady despite the situation. "But we've been fighting back because we have something they don't. We fight for something greater than ourselves." Elias turned to face her, a new resolve hardening in his chest. "They won't win. Not as long as we stand together." The countdown to their assault began. As they launched toward the Xarii fleet, the full scope of their mission loomed large in Elias's mind. The weapon they faced wasn't just a tool of war. It was a test of everything humanity had become. And if they failed, the world they had fought to protect would be gone, consumed from the inside out. It was a race against time. In the vastness of space, the Xarii ships waited, silent and unyielding. But this time, there was something different in the air. This time, the Resistance was coming, not just to fight, but to prove that Earth would never be broken. And this time, the Xarii would face humanity's greatest weapon yet: their unity. The vast emptiness of space stretched before them, the darkness punctuated only by the looming silhouettes of Xarii ships. It was a haunting sight: alien vessels, vast and imposing, waiting to unleash hell on Earth. But this time, the humans were no longer on the defensive. The Resistance had learned, adapted, and now they had one chance to end it all. The fleet of human-made ships, cobbled together from salvaged Xarii tech and Earth's own ingenuity, surged forward. At its helm, Elias Verne stood alongside Captain Irene Kalik. Both were quiet, their faces steely with determination. The enormity of their mission weighed heavily on them, but they knew there was no turning back. This was the final push. "We're on target," Maya's voice came through the comms. "The Xarii fleet is waiting for us. We don't have long before they know we're coming." Elias nodded. "Stay sharp. We don't just need to destroy them. We need to disable the weapon they've set in motion." From the corner of his eye, Elias could see the other Resistance ships maneuvering into position. Each pilot was focused, no room for distraction. This was no longer about surviving the Xarii's wrath. It was about ending it. Aboard the lead Xarii warship, the feeling was different. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The Xarii, once confident in their ability to crush humanity, were now on edge. They had underestimated the tenacity of Earth's resistance. Worse yet, they had underestimated the strength that came with the humans' unity. The Xarii commanders, who had been so certain of their victory, now found themselves caught off guard. Their hive mind was still disrupted from the earlier sabotage, and their communications were fractured. What should have been a well-coordinated defense was now a jumbled mess of misdirected orders and confused actions. Still, the Xarii were not without their resources. They had their weapon, a device capable of amplifying the divisions within human society to a catastrophic level. It was designed not just to destroy, but to unravel the very fabric of humanity, turning them against each other in ways no alien force ever could. The device was hidden deep within their flagship, guarded by elite Xarii forces and protected by a network of defenses. Only a direct strike would disable it. But the Xarii did not count on one thing: human resolve. The resistance approached the flagship with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Maya and her team, stationed at the back of the fleet, were preparing the final phase of their mission, the infiltration of the Xarii warship. Their task was simple but perilous: breach the flagship's defenses, locate the weapon, and destroy it before it could activate. Elias's ship, along with Captain Kalik's, advanced toward the flagship's massive hull, skimming the edges of the Xarii's defenses. Their ships were equipped with stealth technology salvaged from alien tech, but it wouldn't last forever. The Xarii's scanners were sharp, and any delay could mean a quick, violent end. "We're almost there." Maya's voice came through once more, clipped and precise. Ready for the breach. As the human ships closed in on the flagship, the Xarii's defensive shields shimmered to life. Waves of energy cascaded outward, flashing in every direction like a storm of destructive light. The resistance ships weaved between the pulses, narrowly avoiding destruction. The air was thick with tension. "Brace for impact." Irene barked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. In that instant, the flagship's weapon activated, sending a beam of pulsating energy toward the approaching fleet. It was a force unlike anything the Resistance had ever seen. The beam sliced through space, the power of it threatening to tear apart their ships. Elias's heart raced as his ship dodged, twisting and spinning to avoid the devastating beam. The hull groaned under the strain of their evasive maneuvers. They were so close now, too close to fail. "We can't outrun it." Maya's voice cracked with panic. "We have to disable it." Without hesitation, Elias issued the command: "Prepare to breach." "We hit them with everything we've got." In a daring maneuver, their ships shot forward in a final rush, closing the distance between them and the Xarii flagship. The energy beam from the Xarii weapon flared once more, but this time, the Resistance was ready. A volley of human-made missiles, powered by a mix of alien and Earth technology, launched from the ships and streaked through the blackness of space. The missiles impacted with a series of violent explosions, breaking through the flagship shields, causing massive damage. The Xarii flagship reeled. The protective shields began to flicker, weakening under the onslaught of humanity's determined assault. "We've got an opening," Kalik yelled over the comms. "Let's get in there, now." Elias and his team, in their assault ships, made their way toward the breach. They entered the Xarii flagship, a sleek, alien fortress that pulsated with strange energy. The walls seemed to ripple with a sense of foreboding, the corridors illuminated by harsh, red lighting. "This is it," Elias muttered to himself, as the team prepared to split up and move quickly. The Xarii flagship's inner chambers were lined with alien technology, and the deeper they moved, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The weapon they sought was not far now, and as they reached the central chamber, they saw it, a towering device, brimming with alien power, surrounded by rows of Xarii guards. The Xarii knew they were coming. A fierce firefight erupted as Resistance fighters engaged the Xarii soldiers. The two forces clashed in a brutal, fast-paced battle. Sparks flew as weapons collided, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the chamber. Elias's heart pounded, but his focus never wavered. The weapon had to be destroyed. "Get to the core," he shouted to his team. "We have to overload it before they can activate it." They fought their way through the alien defenders, finally reaching the core of the device. Elias and his team moved in sync, working quickly to plant the explosives that would cripple the weapon. The countdown had already begun, and there was no time to lose. "We're set," one of the engineers shouted, his hands moving frantically over the control panel. "The device is armed and ready for detonation." "Then let's get out of here," Maya yelled, turning toward the exit. But as the last of their team retreated, a deafening explosion rang out. The entire flagship shuddered violently as the weapon, the one designed to break humanity's unity, was obliterated in a burst of brilliant light. The shock wave from the explosion rippled through the Xarii fleet. One by one, Their ships began to lose power, drifting helplessly in space. The Resistance had done it. They had destroyed the weapon and dealt a fatal blow to the Xariai's plans. But there was no time to celebrate. The Xarii were not done. They would come for Earth again, but this time they would face something far more dangerous than their weapon: the unwavering unity of humanity. And humanity would not back down. The Xarii flagship had crumbled. Its mighty weapon rendered nothing more than space debris in the void. But as the shock waves spread through the alien fleet, it became clear that while the Resistance had won a crucial battle, the war was far from over. The Xarii were wounded, yes, but they were not defeated. Not yet. Back on Earth, the Resistance had already begun to regroup. The initial euphoria of disabling the Xarii weapon was short-lived. Humanity had been thrust into a new reality, one where their strength, unity, and resolve would be tested like never before. Elias Verne stood on the balcony of the Resistance's command center, looking out at the remnants of their victory. The sky was streaked with red, the sun low on the horizon, casting an almost surreal glow over the world below. A world that had just been saved. A world on the brink of something new. Something they would have to protect at all costs. "We've won," Maya said from behind him, her voice quiet but heavy with meaning. Elias didn't answer immediately. The war had shifted in their favor, but the Xarii were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until Earth was nothing but a memory. He could feel the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him like never before. "We have won," he said finally, turning to face her. "But we're not done yet. The Xarii won't give up, and neither can we. We have to prepare for what's coming next." Maya nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The Resistance had dealt a massive blow to the Xarii war machine, but Earth was still vulnerable. And Elias knew that if they were to succeed, they would need to do more than just fight. They would need to build something stronger. Something that could endure long after the last shot had been fired. Back in space, the remnants of the Xarii fleet were in disarray. Without their flagship, without the weapon that had been their ultimate plan to break humanity's unity, the alien invaders were now leaderless and fractured. But their warships remained intact, and they still had numbers on their side. On the command deck of a Xarii warship, the remaining commanders and officers stood in stunned silence. Their hive mind had been disrupted, their weapon destroyed, their fleet scattered. They were no longer the all-powerful force they had once been. But the Xarii were nothing if not adaptable. They would regroup, they would learn, and they would come back stronger. "We have failed," one of the Xarii commanders said, his voice a low rasp of fury. "But we will not make the same mistake again. Earth will fall." The other commanders nodded in grim agreement. They knew the cost of underestimating humanity now. They had learned the hard way that their strategy of overwhelming force could not crush the spirit of a species that fought for its survival. "But we can still win," another officer declared, a sense of defiance in his voice. "We will use the chaos on Earth to our advantage. We will sow the seeds of division. We will find their weaknesses and exploit them." The commander at the helm of the ship, his mind racing with thoughts of vengeance, looked out at the empty void of space. The war was far from over, and this time they would be prepared. On Earth, the battle for survival had transitioned from one of desperate resistance to one of renewal. The human race had come together in ways they never had before. The loss of entire cities and the constant threat of alien invasion had galvanized the population. It had become a fight for more than just survival. It was a fight for their way of life. Elias and his team were working around the clock, not just to rebuild, but to fortify Earth against what was surely coming next. They knew that to defeat the Xarii once and for all, they would need to bring together every nation, every resource, every scientist and engineer, and build something more powerful than the Xarii fleet. They were no longer fighting as isolated groups or scattered nations. They were united. Humanity had discovered the true power of their collective will. At the heart of the effort, Elias found himself working alongside Captain Irene Kalik, Maya, and countless others. Together, they were laying the foundations for the next stage of the war, An Earth united not just by necessity, but by purpose. "We have to stay one step ahead," Khalik said one evening, her voice weary but determined. She was staring at the global map, tracking the remnants of the Khazari fleet and the scattered groups of their remaining forces. "We know they'll come for us again, but this time we'll be ready." Elias leaned over the map, his eyes scanning the information. "We need to adapt faster than they can. They've learned from their mistakes, and so must we." Maya, standing beside them, spoke up. "We're not just going to fight, we're going to rebuild. We're going to show the Khazari that they can't break us. They'll find that what they thought was our greatest weakness, our differences, will be our greatest strength." And that was when Elias understood. This wasn't just about military power anymore. The true weapon humanity had was the power of unity, the ability to come together, to put aside differences, to rise as one. It was the very thing the Khazari had never understood, and it was the thing that would ultimately be their undoing. Months passed, and Earth continued to recover. Humanity rebuilt its cities, its infrastructure, and its defense systems. The Khazari, scattered and reeling, began to regroup in the outer reaches of the solar system. But they were no longer the invincible force they had once been. The resistance had become a symbol of unity, a beacon of hope for the entire planet. Every corner of the globe contributed to the cause, from scientists working to develop new technologies to citizens volunteering to defend their homes. Earth was becoming a fortress. And yet, Elias knew it was only a matter of time before the Khazari would strike again. But this time, humanity would be ready. This time, the Khazari would face a united Earth, a force they could never defeat. On the eve of the next battle, Elias stood alone, looking out at the stars. His thoughts were a whirlwind of memories, of the battles fought, of lives lost, of the incredible strength humanity had shown in the face of extinction. He had seen the darkness, but now, as he looked up at the night sky, he could see something different. He could see the light of hope burning brighter than ever before. Humanity had endured, and they would continue to fight, because Earth was their home, and they would never let it fall.